Floor is open for questions, views, observations, anything you may have in response to the presentations of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, everything clear, nothing you want to debate, nothing you want to, there you go. One microphone coming up.
Can I ask a question about the first presentation, the no-go areas calculations? I can see it's very useful in that Humber estuary scenario that you presented, but essentially that's just an enhancement to what pilots and VTS do already. The real benefit would be deep sea, in inverted commas, to prevent the OVIT scenario that you talked about at the beginning. Did you look at whether that software could really run on commercial ECDIS systems? The practicalities of getting live tidal data out to ships that are outside 3G range and all that sort of thing? Because that's where the real benefits are, I think, rather than the marginal benefits in the port scenario.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. The real benefit would be the simplification of a too complicated system that is already in the ECDIS. For the technical things, I think I hand over to the program.
Yes, since I helped develop that system, technically it's very much possible, because even though it's combining all these data, so you have huge amount of data sources, huge amount of data points, but that's only on the shore side. What the ship is actually receiving is an aggregated final polygon. It doesn't have to be that much data, and compared to other types of communication, it's really not a lot of data that you need to transfer out there, because it's important to note that it's not the full data picture. What the ship is receiving can just be a single polygon consisting on some points. So maybe the data it's based on can be millions of points, but what the ship is receiving might only be 10 points, because that's all you need to draw the polygon. And what kind of data you're combining, it can be anything. It can be tidal, it can be weather, of course the base bathymetry. You could also have, we talked to the Australians a bit, where they have the Great Coral Reef. Maybe the ship can sail there physically, but you just don't want it to go there. So you can combine it into a unified go, no-go area. If it's red, don't go there.
Thank you.
And another comment on that could be that this is a system that it's a service that will be available in certain areas depending on the service provided. So in the Danish example, for instance, the Danish HO would make that depth database available through this service. In the Humber area, it could be the Humber Estuary Services that is giving this data. So while you're generally used to having all the data in the chart, having the national HO responsible for it, you have now a situation where you might have the depth no-go area service published by the Humber Estuary Services, so that you have different publishers with all the trust that has to go into that things. So that's something that could be debated. How do you think about that? You can imagine that some shipping companies will say that we don't trust the Humber Estuary Services, so don't use that no area in there. But trust the Danish, so you can use the Danish.
This is, of course, just an example. Augmented or virtual reality. Any other questions? Come on, ladies and gentlemen. There's one back there.
Yes, thank you. It's not really a question, but maybe just a remark on a notice for no-go areas too. At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about vessels that did not use the ECDIS correctly, and I think that there will be always a question of the training of the mariners. It is the case with the ECDIS that are not used accordingly to the values and the technical parts of the vessels. And here we want to give something to help the mariners, and I think that we mustn't forget that we will have to train to use these tools, the no-go areas or other things, like we have to train to to use the ACCSEAS system. So, the question is, how could we think about this training with such tool? What did you? Maybe you thought already about this point. I don't know.
Training issues.
Yeah, training issues. So it's interesting. I recommend you to read that accident report from the Maritime Accident Investigation Board. In the foreword of that, the controller is writing that this is the third accident that the MAIB is investigating where insufficient handling of the ACCSEAS system is the reason for. So we built a system that is so complicated that we need to train and train and train, and that training is not taking place because we can see that all the time. And I've personally been working in developing a system where I should not mention the name, but where the participant again and again failed in doing precisely this, setting the depth contour, the safety depth contour, the safety depth, and everything like that. It's complicated. It's difficult to understand. And one of the main things with e-navigation is that we have to make it intuitive and easy to use so that we don't run into these kind of failures all the time.
Thank you, Thomas. Especially, I think, for that final notion, which is a very important one. There's a question back there, or at least a hand. Maybe just waving it.
Just had a question about the inter-VTS exchange. It was mentioned that the extra radar information that you get from vessels should be enough to cover the region, because if there are no vessels with radar, there are no ships. A little bit maybe bold to say it like that. But I was wondering about the small ships. The small ships that don't have the radar exchange. The sailing vessels and maybe some other kind of things. Do you want to monitor them as well? Because that's not possible without sufficient radar coverage.
What is with this concept is if you have large ships with radars and more ships getting this equipment on board, this solution, you cover more and more areas. And nearby a large ship, the smaller ships are detected. We used a small rib for it, and it was detected by the radar of the Waardbiezel. So eventually, if it gets more integrated to the onboard systems, you get a better coverage of an area.
Then I'm wondering about what's happening with the labels you put on those small ships. Because if for a moment this ship is lost, it pops up on another radar system 2 hours after that, you lost your label.
That's probably things that have to be solved. And mostly it's just a number on those small vessels. Maybe if they have AES on board, it gets automatically labeled. But depends on what's on board of small vessels. So there are still some issues, but at least you see there's a vessel.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Another question?
I want to give a small comment on.
You want to comment on?
Just a small comment
Okay.
on the labels
Go ahead.
of the small crafts. We have this radar image. It's built in a different way, but transmitted to our onboard CPUs in our ship. And
Could you maybe just say what you mean by we, our, so present yourself who you are, so it's clear.
I was just trying to do that when you interfered, so if you just have wait a little bit, then thank you very much. On our PPU systems as pilots, we have also the possibility to receive the radar coverage from the shore. And especially the small craft, we switch off all the labels. We only use the marks. It's very valuable to see the marks, so the dots or whatever it is, that we know there is a ship. We're not interested in the name or the track or whatever. It's like you wanted. It's very useful.
Okay, thank you for that comment. There's another one.
Yes, it's me again. Sorry. Two questions, in fact. In all these tools we could see here, what about wrong data transmitted? I mean, what about cybersecurity of the data that could be transmitted or that other people could use to transmit and to have bad consequences? And the other question is again for no-go area. I suppose maybe I can't remember, but I suppose that there is a link between no-go areas and the data used by the vessels, for example, with ENCs. Does it work already with data from other types of electronical charts? Does it work with, I don't know, with private electronical charts? And in such areas where we won't have any ENCs with good scales, how this tool can be used, or has it to be used, in fact? Because if we use not good data or data with insufficient scales, maybe the result of the display of the go or no-go area could be very misleading for the mariners. No?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, two questions. One on the transmission of the VDS signals, and the other one is on the relation between no-go areas like this. So it's probably yours. So you want some time to think about it on the first question, or you're ready to take that one?
About wrong data.
Yeah.
That's always a point that somebody can send in wrong data. You also have with AES can do that. What we did here was a secure line, secure connection. It was from a vessel, so you have your AES, you have your radar, you have multiple sensors. So with the multiple sensors you can, and for more ships or for more sensors you can point out if it's a good target or not. So you can evaluate it and give a value to it. But it's always a problem.
Okay, and on the no-go area activist relation?
I don't know if I understood your question right, but something that, let's say if I understood it. So if the no-go area is going to be of any use, we need to get better data than we already have in the ECDIS in a sense. So we need to get access to the high resolution bathymetrical database of the HO or of that port or something like that. This data is usually classified and not handed out readily. So a classification issue will be a thing. So what the system does is requests just one contour for a specific level. But of course, if you collect every level, you can actually sort of reproduce that classified depth database. So that is one problem that has to, but I don't know. The other problem, if I understand you right, is that the way it is right now, the system, you can only use the EPD. You cannot use any system.
No, I can just, so the data used is exactly because the ENC data contained in ENC cells might be lagging for this because we wanted really high precision. So the data sources used are straight from the hydrographical offices. And yes, there were some security issues, but the end user doesn't actually see the final data. He sees an aggregated view of it. So it will be very hard to recreate that view because we're also combining weather information and tidal information. So the end user doesn't actually see the individual data points. He doesn't have access to that. That's located on a secure server. So all you're getting is the polygons generated by it. And it is based on very specific hydrographical data. So we're going sort of straight to the source and getting it straight from the hydrographical offices, getting their output in something called grid bags, but we support multiple different types of format that we import into our system, which we can then use.
Okay.
And of course, one of the points with projects like this is that what we want to do is get acceptance for this, and in the future get a standard that would allow any type of ECDIS to be able to display this type of data.
Thank you very much. Time for one more question. But if there's no appetite for that one, I give you some bonus minutes, and you may want to use that over lunch. Take the opportunity.